ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutofanya lolote sio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800.
Winds it down on African World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And it is exactly 9 o'clock on this Tuesday as we bring you the Tuesday edition of Africa World Hour. We'll look at several hotspots in terms of elections, pre and post. Pre, we're talking about Tanzania. We'll look at the situation there in Dar es Salaam, and we'll also look at post-election violence in Cameroon following Paul Biya's announcement as the incoming president, though he is the incumbent. So 60 minutes of the very latest news from here on the continent and beyond. We bring you the voices, the faces and the stories that matter, and that is from an African perspective. Welcome to it. I am Tsipiso Makwetla. Let's take a look at your top stories this hour.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsipiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
We start in Malawi, where President Peter Mutharika has imposed a ban on the export of raw minerals in an effort to ensure the country fully benefits from its mineral wealth by processing minerals locally rather than exporting them in their raw form. Mutharika says Malawi could earn up to $500 million annually if mining operators at the Kasia retail site in Lilongwe and the Kakakunde rare earth site in Balaka are properly developed and managed by Dr. Bertha Bangara Chikadza, a macroeconomist and economics lecturer at the Malawi University of Science and Technology. She explains.
The anti-presidential critic, it shows exactly that they are pro the president. They are not in a position to accept any criticism, be it constructive criticism or a criticism which may not be constructive. And that on its own undermines the sense of the human right in the country, especially Section 61, where we are having the coverage of the freedom of expression in one point. So it is subject to them. Cannot allow a situation where the president is having a closed space of criticism. That is why we raised a concern.
And we do apologize for that incorrect sound piece. So moving on to other news, Botswana has ended the national public health emergency, the situation in the country as health facilities continues to improve, and we note that the country has made moves. That's according to the president, that he says the country is not out of the woods yet. Health Minister Dr. Stephen Mudise made the revelation in his update on the state of medicines and medical commodities. Botswana had declared a public health emergency in late August when it had a shortage of essential medicines and medical equipment. Dr. Mudise has more.
The situation at our clinics has improved, though not fully stabilized. Most medicines and chronic conditions are managed at this level. such as diabetes, hypertension, as well as antibiotics, pain medicines, which are now available, though not at optimum levels. As at the beginning of October, availability in our hospitals had gone up to 36% from the initial 17% reported in August. Our target is to reach 97% and to maintain at least 3 months stock at CMS from December going forward.
U.S. President Donald Trump says the first batch of US-made missiles for Japan's F-35 planes will be delivered this week. Trump made the announcement to troops aboard an aircraft carrier near Tokyo after meeting with Japan's new prime minister. Earlier, the US president welcomed a pledge by Sanae Takaichi to accelerate Tokyo's military build and buy American-made defense equipment. Speaking alongside Trump, Takaichi hailed the US-Japan alliance. Okay, now the World's Meteorological Organization says it expects a catastrophic situation in Jamaica in the coming hours. Hurricane Melissa makes its landfall with wind gusts of more than 300 kilometers an hour. The UN agency described Melissa as the storm of the century, with huge tidal surges and flash floods. There's also been steady landslides, fallen trees, and at least 3 deaths in Jamaica already. Nasafur Mgedi from the Red Cross says the storm could affect more than 1.5 million people.
Let me reiterate my unwavering determination here. Japan is ready to contribute even more proactively to peace and stability of the region. I am determined to elevate the Japan-US alliance, which has already become the greatest alliance in the world, to even greater heights.
All right, and Tanzania heads for elections this Wednesday. Analysts have raised key questions surrounding the 2025 polls, which include the systemic exclusion of leading opposition candidates, tightened restrictions on media, increases in reported abductions and attacks on activists, as well as the limited presence of external observer missions. For more on this channel, Africa's Ntlantla Mahlangu spoke to Fergus Kell, research fellow at Africa Program at Chatham House.
The lack of real competition and choice in terms of the elections, in that it does look very much like the CCM candidate for the ruling party and current president Samia Suluhu Hassan will win a large majority because the leading opposition challengers for the presidency, Tundu Lissu of Chadema, has been imprisoned since April on treason charges, and the other leading candidate, Luhaga Mpina, who had defected from the ruling party, his candidacy has been barred by the National Electoral Commission. So there's one aspect there of the lack of choice. And a second issue would be broadly around some allegations of increasing abductions, attacks and arbitrary arrests on opposition activists and other opposition political figures in the country. There's been quite critical reports from major international NGOs like Human Rights Watch, like Amnesty International, and a panel of UN experts over recent months alleging a real uptick in terms of repressive actions towards activists and other opposition figures. So there have been some reports of potential demonstrations around election day, but I would expect that the security services in Tanzania will keep quite a close lid on the situation.
And what do you make of the tightened restrictions on media?
To this one is a slightly shorter term restriction on social media platforms, and we've seen that the government have restricted the use of the X platform, formerly Twitter, for use by citizens, and some other social media platforms, including Jamii Forums, which is a popular local forum site in Tanzania that's frequently used for political discourse. And then in terms of more traditional media outlets, we have seen a number of Tanzania's largest media houses face suspensions from operations, having posted potentially critical stories about government or about the president. So I think the media space in Tanzania is currently in quite a constricted place at the moment, and I think the ability of media, and both traditional and on social media, to make more perhaps critical statements or report on the progress of some of these opposition trials that I've mentioned the freedom has not been fully there.
Several transport companies have announced plans to halt their services as the country goes for elections. What do you make of this?
Some logistical challenges that arise over the course of election day that would not be a surprising outcome, but I think looking at the voter registration figures, Tanzania's National Electoral Commission has reported over 37 million people eligible to vote in these elections. That's a considerable increase, both since the local elections last year, but especially since the previous national elections in 2020. So I think for the Tanzanian officials, given the nature of this election, given some of the discourse in the lead up to it, they will be, I think, quite keen to see a high turnout in order to that reflects potentially the strength of the CCM victory that many are predicting for the election.
Despite the restrictions that you've alluded to as the country goes for these elections, what would you say are some of the challenges that need urgent attention?
There is a huge economic potential for the country. That's both in terms of its kind of strategic location as a gateway to both Eastern and Southern Africa, to some of those partners inland, like Eastern DRC, Rwanda, Uganda, and even to Zambia and Malawi as a real kind of strategic corridor there. But also in terms of its own abundant natural resources. So Tanzania is blessed with significant offshore gas deposits, with many strategic and critical minerals. And it has, in terms of population growth, Tanzania is forecast to become, its population set to double by 2050. That would make it the 15th largest country in the world. So it's one of the fastest growing countries in the world, and there's significant economic potential there. But I think the challenge is that the rate Tanzania's economic growth has been pretty high and stable over the last decade or so, averaging at about 6%. The challenge, though, is that Tanzania has been one of the lowest countries in the world in terms of translating economic growth into poverty reduction. And the government is very proud of the fact that Tanzania is in the lower middle income bracket of countries. It's set an ambitious target to become an upper middle income country by 2050. But actually the country really lags behind other countries in that income group in terms of metrics like electrification. The World Bank says that's only at 48%, which is much lower than other countries in that group. So really kind of addressing some of those stubborn challenges around poverty, around wider transformative development, making sure that those resources are used in a way that delivers benefits for the whole of society. Those are really critical questions for Tanzania in the longer term.
And that was my colleague speaking to Fergus Kell, Research Fellow at Africa Program, Chatham House, and brings the time to 30 minutes past 9.
Nighttime radio, just the way you like it, on Channel Africa, where the night comes alive.
Madapiri pazochitika. Madapiri pazochitika.
Mafuta galimoto akwera mtengo mudziko la Malawi, ndipo nkhani anthu ayilandira mosiyanasiyana, ndipo mtolankhani nzathu mudziko la Malawi Kondwani Nyamasauka tili naye pa line pano kuti atifotokozere zambiri. Kondwani, kodi uli bwanji? Mafuta galimoto kodi akwera kufika pa bwanji?
Mafuta galimoto akwera amene tuyankhula pano kukambonena kuti usiku wathawu petrol wakwera kuchokera pa 2,500 3530 kwacha kukafika pa 3499 kwacha. Kuma nkhani ya mapercentage ndi 38.30%, pamene diesel wachoka pa 2734 kwacha kukafika pa 3500 kwacha, yomwe ikuyimira kuma percentage a 28.02%.
zochitika pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo, lolemba mpaka lachisanu ndi Madapiri.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And we continue with some of the news developments around the continent and beyond. South Africa's parliament has heard that foreign technology firms are sidestepping the country's empowerment and transformation laws, making it difficult to track whether investment in the ICT sector benefits citizens. The warning came from the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment ICT Sector Council, which says many multinationals refuse to share information on their local operations. Dimakazo Leshoro filed this report.
We do have present with us representatives from the Triple BEE ICT Sector Council. We have invited them today to come and present to us around progress that is made in terms of entrenching, advancing transformation within the ICT industry.
That's Chairperson of the committee, Kusela Sangoni. The ICT Sector Council is an independent body responsible for monitoring how companies in the information and communications industry comply with South Africa's Black Economic Empowerment laws, known as Triple BEE. But the council told MPs on Tuesday that big global technology firms often refuse to disclose data, undermining efforts to verify whether their investments meet legal obligations. Minki Tulo is the chairperson of the ICT Sector Council.
All of the multinationals that have submitted applications to us have rejected providing us evidence-based data for us to determine their contribution into the country, because you need to understand that when you are applying for an EIP application, you are basically indicating that you are not giving 30% of your equity as per the ICASA Act, but you will give an equivalent of that 30% as an investment in the country. The challenge we've had is that none of these multinationals have given us the data.
Under South African law, large foreign companies operating locally are expected to either allocate 30% of their equity to black locals or invest an equivalent in value programs to promote transformation. But Tulo says enforcement is weak and that major companies, including IBM, Oracle, and Dell, have delayed or avoided full disclosure.
Some of these entities will bypass us when they feel that we are asking hard questions, and they will indicate that they are not willing to give us the information because they've got a different arrangement elsewhere. So this is where we as council, as the watchdogs of transformation, we have made a request that we ought to be given access to the data.
The council also criticized poor coordination between the Department of Communications itself and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition.
We have been engaging with the two departments to formulate a more cohesive structure that will provide the oversight. Reason being that there is a lack of data sharing where, for instance, when we are asked as the council whether the applicant of an EIP does actually contribute 30%, we are unable to do that. And nor is the DTIC able to provide that data.
The council says only 3 empowerment applications have been received from multinational firms in the past year, a tiny number given the size of the industry. Tulo warned that without funding and better oversight, South Africa risks losing control of transformation in one of its most strategic sectors.
There's been a huge investment in terms of ESD programs. That said, those ESD programs do not necessarily align with the national agenda, one. Number two, those ESD programs are not sustainable because they are peaked at 12 months. And when we've asked all the applicants and the participants in the market, they're unable to give a theory of change being impact assessment to the market. So a lot of what has been happening in the market is being evaluated from a monetary value versus an impact and sustainability growth perspective of the industry.
She's called on government to fund new compliance and data tracking systems to ensure tech investors meet their legal commitments and that South Africa's digital economy grows in line with its transformation goals. For Channel Africa News, Samdi Magazo in Johannesburg.
At 19 minutes past 9, let's let you in on the latest now on Cameroon. Its post-election period has been marred by violence, with at least 7 people reported killed, allegedly by security forces. Dozens have been injured and hundreds more have been arrested across the country since the October presidential election. According to Human Rights Watch, the authorities should immediately rein in their security forces, promptly and impartially investigate the excessive use of force and release all those who are being wrongfully held. The 92-year-old Paul Biya is Africa's oldest serving leader and now extends his decades-long rule. But questions abound about the credibility of the vote, and the political freedoms remain front and center as a line of concern. We're joined now by Human Rights Watch Central Africa Director, and that is Louis Mudge. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. So just tell us about the reports that you're getting from on the ground in Cameroon at the moment.
Yeah, they're still coming in. The main violence right now is focused on the economic capital, a city called Douala, which is on the coast. There is some outbreaks of violence in some of the other urban areas, but Douala is where it's most acute. This is violence that's being committed by protesters, and then a pretty heavy-handed response from the security forces. So it's certainly the death count. We published a report yesterday. Sorry, it was actually very, very early this morning here in the States, on 4 dead, but that death count has gone up. The arrests continue. Unfortunately, this is kind of par for the course with regards to state response to any attempts to protest in Cameroon. So we expect the violence to continue to increase.
Just on that death toll, I know we spoke to our reporter and they put the figure at around 7 or 8. What figures are you getting?
We're tracking with 7 or 8. We anticipate that number to go up because as of the day closing in Douala, there were anticipation of more violence in the days to come.
And when we're talking about the security forces' role in the deaths, the injuries, the summary arrests, you have called in the government to rein in their forces, so to speak. But just give us your observations of how they've carried themselves. And when you say disproportionate violence, what exactly are you seeing that qualifies that description?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are guidelines, internationally established, also regionally established across Africa, guidelines for how to deal with crowd control, and how to deal with protests, even protests that do emerge to be violent. And a key tenet of those guidelines is not just to fire upon people with live ammunition, which is what we're documenting. So, they're not following basic, state security forces are not following basic guidelines with regards to how to deal with the protests and how to deal with an outbreak of civil violence. Moreover, we've established, this is not limited exclusively to Cameroon, across the region, most acutably in Chad. We've, seen how even the use of tear gas canisters, by the state security forces or rubber bullets are not used correctly. We've seen tear gas canisters fired into crowds and killing people, and rubber bullets used at close range. So the methodologies for crowd control are not being used appropriately. Obviously, we at HRW, we completely understand and acknowledge that a government has a right and moreover an obligation to quell civil violence. However, we've seen in Cameroon time and time again legitimate protests conflated with this violence. And so this is an issue that we're continuing to document in real time in Cameroon. Basically, people feel they've been cheated out of this election. There certainly was, in our opinion, a real groundswell of support for the main opponent, Issa Chimora Bakare, and people are protesting what they feel is a stolen election, and they should have the right to do that. The worrying aspect for us is the conflation with violence with that peaceful protesting. And so we'll have to see how that emerges in the time to come.
And I mean, without getting too technical about the system itself and what the electoral law says, I hear what you're saying, and that certainly is some of the reports that we've received from within Cameroon about groundswell support for Bakare. But the question then is, there is what is said openly out on the streets, but how that translates into the votes, on polling day and the ballots themselves when they're being counted. What have you noticed as an anomaly that, would be described as flawed within the electoral process?
It's still too early to say. So it's just too early to say. There will need to be a credible and independent accounting for this vote. The fact is that I'm not optimistic that that's going to happen. This has already been officially announced that BIA won in the realm of 53%, and I fully anticipate this to be certified for any appeals of this decision to be cast aside, and for BIA to begin his 8th term as the oldest head of state. It's very hard for us, especially, we had our researcher kicked out of Cameroon. It's very, very difficult for Human Rights Watch, working on a closed country like Cameroon, to have a meaningful opinion with regards to how free and fair this vote was. We have anecdotal evidence that demonstrates that there were certainly some problems with this election. But for us, it's just too early to say with regards to whether this was truly a stolen election. I will say, as someone who's been following the country for a number of years, the groundswell support for Chiroma really did demonstrate that many, I don't know if it was majority, but many, many Cameroonians seemed very, very poised for a change, even for a change to someone like Chiroma, who was not an outsider. He was aligned with President Paul Biya for many, many years, and this guy's no spring chicken. This guy's in his late 70s. He's a known entity, but there seems to have been a real groundswell of support for just someone besides Paul Biya to be the president. Whether this vote was free and fair, it's still too early to say, and that remains to be seen.
And just looking at the response of the security forces to what you say are legitimate protests, and mostly led by the youth, we've seen the governor of Latoria State basically characterizing them as young people high on drugs, attacking security forces. I mean, what does that tell us about the incoming administration of Paul Biya, and even though he is the incumbent, and the capture of the security forces? How is he then likely to deal with further dissent in his new term?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the level of dissent. Cameroon, like many of the countries in the region, if things quiet down, a Biya administration will tolerate some degree of criticism of government policies in the press. It's important to be clear. If we want to keep it within an African context, we're not necessarily talking about a Mali, where any type of criticism of the government is construed as being seditious. We're not there yet in Cameroon. So if things quiet down, the Abiy government will certainly allow for some degree of criticism. I think the real worry for us is, will this tempo continue in Douala? Will it extend to other cities? Are the youth and yes, of course, some youth may have been on drugs. By no means were all of them. I mean, this is sort of blanket categorization is just completely unfair and out of line. There's many youth in Cameroon who just desire some type of change. They've grown up their entire lives. If you're in your 40s, all you've seen was Paul Biya as president. And so there's certainly a desire for that. I think it's really the level of protests. If they continue at what we're seeing, the crackdown will be swift and significant, and groups like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International are going to have a lot of work on their hands because we're going to see mass arrests continue. We're already seeing that in the hundreds, and we will see this is a government that will certainly kill people in the streets to maintain its existence. If the protests quell, I think we'll see another iteration of what we saw in 2018, which was mass convictions of hundreds of opponents. We saw this in 2018 with Maurice Kamto. We'll see a further closing of the political space. However, radios will operate, internet will operate without rupture. We've seen the internet being cut over the last 36 hours on multiple occasions. We'll see that restored. We'll see some degree of media able to push things a little bit with regards to criticism of government policy. But in terms of political plurality, this is just another example of Cameroon really closing off its space. If the protests don't continue, we're looking at Cameroon further descending into sort of political wasteland where.
So on the one hand, you say, I mean, the government certainly won't hesitate to kill people on the streets if the protests continue in the manner that they do. And you had mentioned earlier on being careful about blanket descriptions, and I was just thinking about the security forces, the gendarmes, gendarmerie, if contextually in certain parts of the continent, that name in itself has a negative connotation and has been applied to a heavy-handed security forces. Ideologically speaking, is that the way that they see themselves in terms of protecting the mandate of whoever is at the helm, as in it's par for the course for them, the gendarmerie, to behave in that manner to protect the state?
No, I would say Cameroon is a specific instance. They're protecting Paul Biya. Much like many of these countries in the region, the gendarmes and the military oftentimes are the ones who are the best paid and the best fed. And so I think in Cameroon, we're seeing real lines of patronage playing out in real time. If Chiroma was elected and if power was transferred peacefully, it would be very tense. You would not see the state security forces instantly switch all their allegiance over to him. So I think we're seeing a lot of the established lines of patronage established over decades by Paul Biya and his accolades. I think we're seeing that play out.
Thank you so much for... Lois, can you still hear us? Because I think you were speaking there, but you were muted.
I got you now. Yep.
Okay. But unfortunately, we have run out of time, but we certainly will be in touch again to speak to you on what you're seeing on the ground and how you're mobilizing. Human Rights Watch Central Africa Director Louis Mudge speaking to us on the latest scenes unfolding in Douala. In some cases, we've heard in Yaoundé as well. It brings the time to 27 minutes to 10.
Ukatili wa kijinsia unaharibu maisha na kutenga jamii. Hutokea nyumbani, shuleni, kazini na mara nyingi kwa ukimya. Lakini hauwezi kuendelea ukiona, ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutofanya lolote sio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800 428 428 ili kuripoti unyanyasaji au kupata msaada. GBV ikomeshwe na wewe. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwenu na shirika la SABC.
The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
The story that takes us to Zambia. There are two men actually that were sentenced to prison for the plot to kill the president with witchcraft. You go like, what? So these guys were arrested actually in Lusaka. And what was found on them was a live chameleon. Can you believe that? Animal tails and bottles of concoction. That law takes us back to 1914, which is the Witchcraft Act. I can imagine now arrested and they go to jail for the next 2 years. You know, I presume that when you get to jail, they get to ask you actually, what is it that you committed? Now, this is the first of its kind, by the way, for somebody to be arrested for such. They remember whenever they pass, hey, Chikanga, hey, Uloya, hey, Mulosi. And imagine here I am in these early hours of the mornings, I get to talk about witchcraft.
Saturday and Sunday mornings belong to the Morning Switch. 3 to 6 a.m. Central African Time. Nighttime radio, just the way you like it. On Channel Africa, where the night comes alive. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
All right, let's bring you up to speed on this. Africa's agricultural future. It's taking center stage this week as leaders, experts and policymakers gather for the 21st Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Programme Partnership Platform, known as CADP PP, alongside the 16th Africa Day for Food and Nutrition Security Day. The joint event brings together key players from across the continent to reflect on progress and challenges in achieving food security, agricultural transformation and resilient food systems. Under the African Union's flagship CADP framework, the discussions aim to strengthen collaboration, boost investment in agriculture. And to speak more about it, Chikondi Chapvuta Mkawa, chairperson of the CADP, non-state actors, joins us now. Very good evening, Chair. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening, and it's an honor to join you live from Kigali.
So just tell us about the strategic importance of the CADP partnership platform and what this year's gathering aims to achieve.
Thank you. So the CADP partnership platform brings together different actors that are transforming food systems, whether it be from policy, the private sector, but also as non-state actors working together to achieve a transformation. So every year we gather to learn from each other, but to also see how we can shape policy. This year is quite important because we are ending the 10-year Malabo era, and from January we're starting the Kampala era of the food systems transformation for the continent. This year is also very important as we will be learning from each other on what went well in the last 10 years and what can we take to ensure that the dream that was had in 2004 to have an Africa that is self-sufficient, an Africa that feeds itself, and an Africa that is growing its GDP from agriculture becomes a reality.
And what were the objectives of the Malabo Declaration, and which, as you say, is now leading into the Kampala mandate?
So within the Malabo, one of the key things was the investment of the national GDP into agriculture. So it was 10% of your national budget had to go towards financing agriculture interventions. That was key, apart from other areas such as investment in climate, investment in trade between countries, but also accountability and other areas that we saw grow the continent's food basket. For Kampala, what comes as different is we still have that investment of 10% into agriculture, but it's now layered with more inclusivity, more governance around it, but also ensuring that everyone is playing a key role, from members of parliament, from the non-state actors, but also seeing how governments are not working just in silos. So this time we're saying food systems. So it's no longer a mandate of just the Ministry of Agriculture, but every player within the food chain.
Whole that is.
As it stands, we are still a long way. We have seen rising numbers of food insecure people, especially with the climatic impacts that are coming in. But the beauty of the Kampala Declaration is there is a specific objectives that looks at how we can do agriculture in the era of changing climate. So how do we deliver more productivity with the changing environment from all aspects that ensure food becomes available, food is traded, and then also there is enough that Africa can feed its people, but also feed others around it.
And then just tell us then, what are, you mentioned climatic conditions and challenges. What are some of the main drivers of food insecurity in Africa? And obviously there must be a difference in country context. Are there hotspot areas that we're particularly concerned about as a continent within the AU framework?
Yeah, so apart from the climatic impacts, we also have conflict that has an impact on how food is made available for a majority of the continent. And then we also look at issues of the soil health. Most of the soils are being degraded either through the use of fertilizers that's low in most cases, or use of a lot of fertilizers that are damaging the soils. So having that safe balance between the two. But also in most cases, and we have seen this especially after COVID, there has been rising costs of food inputs, from seed availability, also other inputs that ensure that there is food available. Then we have also seen a lot of attention in most cases for maybe just crops and not enough going to livestock or the fisheries. And that's why even at this year's KDPP, there is a focus on blue foods, on how we can boost aquaculture and fisheries apart from livestock, to receive the same attention just like crops do at the continental and national level. So there are different barriers depending on context and on country, but majority we have seen that we have these good policies that are developed, less that goes in terms of implementation, less attention is put to prioritize these great commitments that have been made by the heads of state. And that's why as non-state actors, our role comes in to ensure accountability. What is committed, if it is fully implemented, we would see an Africa that achieves this dream. But more and more, we have these commitments made, but less action that takes place to ensure their full realization. So that, for me, is one of the biggest blows that we have seen within the Malabo era. And we are hoping that with Kampala, with that specificity of inclusivity, ensuring no one is left behind, we should see an Africa that lives to what it signs on to.
And just a final question on what are the green shoots of, what we'd have seen with the implementation of the Malabo Convention that you're hoping to really double down on with the Kampala Declaration?
So what we are hoping to achieve this time is, as we have said, this time we are looking at food systems. So the food systems angle expects all of us to work together. So it's no longer a siloed approach. It's no longer something you leave up to just one minister. There's going to be one, of course, person in charge, but everybody has to play a role. We have seen that if we do this time around within the Kampala era, where all ministries are taking part, when it comes to even financing at the legislative level, we have that budgetary allocation showing the prioritization that goes towards the CADIP implementation. Every 2 years, there's a biannual review process that shows how countries are faring in terms of the commitments that they have made. And this time, that process will still be there. And we are going to go in as non-state actors, ensuring that the recommendations that come from this accountability framework don't just come as reports, but they are forming how national budgets are formed, they are forming how we prioritize, and they are informing the whole financial management system from that food systems lens. Because only when we work together, that's when we can achieve the change. But also the aspect of siloing food into just one key ministry or one department is what has led to a lot of aspects failing. So we need to really work together and find a dialogue spot where everyone is taking their active role.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Chukondi Chavuta Mkawa speaking to us about food security and what the AU is trying to do through various partnerships. It brings the time to 14 minutes to 10. Now, tensions are arising in Tanzania ahead of the country's upcoming general elections, with human rights organizations warning of a wave of intimidation, particularly of opposition parties. Violence and political repression is also threatening the credibility of the polls, that we're told. Reports point to a growing crackdown on opposition figures, journalists and civil society voices, raising serious concerns about whether the electoral environment can truly be called free and fair. Meanwhile, opposition leader Tundu Lissu, who should be on the campaign trail rallying support, is on trial for treason, and his party, Chadema, is banned from running. So let's speak now to Deodatus Balile, chairperson of the Tanzania Editors Forum. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Good evening to you. How are you doing there?
Well, thank you. And we hope you are well there in Tanzania in the run up to the elections. How would you describe the environment, the mood ahead of that poll?
I would say it's 50-50 in a sense that some political parties are participating in the poll, some are not. I have heard you saying that the opposition party, Chadema, was banned. But the real story is not that it was banned, but the party declined to participate in the elections. There are procedures for participating in the elections, and the party passed the resolution that it won't participate in these forthcoming elections because of their demands, where they were saying no reforms, no elections. So they declined to participate in the elections, not that they were bad to participate in the elections. They opted not to participate, which is something internal, in a sense that they were claiming that the government has to have to implement some reforms, including writing the new constitution, amending a number of laws, electoral laws. But the government heeded to their call, let's say by enacting about 2, 3, 4 laws, which transformed the environment of the elections, but still they declined to participate. And I'm not in a position to know why exactly they did not opt to participate, and they opted not to participate after their demands were met, like introducing an independent electoral commission, an independent electoral commission. The law was enacted to introduce an independent electoral commission. Also, they were demanding that the government should amend the law to do away with the national electoral law, which was of 1985, and altogether enact a new law which would be guiding the elections for presidential, parliamentary, and the councillors. That law was enacted. However, all that said, and to cut the story short, still, Tundu Lissu is charged in the court of law for treason. And in our laws in this country, we are not allowed to comment on anything which is under active consideration in the court of law. So for that one, I cannot say. But back to the mood of the elections, we can see the country is preparing. As we are talking here, I'm at the airport in Mwanza, where the ruling party was holding the last campaign. And at that rally, a lot of people attended it. And the mood was so high to the extent that I was surprised to find the number of people, which I didn't expect to see massive number of people attending this meeting. But it has happened.
Now, just in terms of, because as you write, Mr. Lucy's party did encourage other opposition parties to not take part in the elections. Were they the only ones who so-called boycotted it, or are there other opposition parties who believe that there are legitimate concerns about the environment ahead of the elections?
You see, that's what I could say. It is a bit confusing. Whilst Chadema declined to participate in the elections, some or other political parties, by the number of 17 or so, are participating. And they have fielded presidential candidates, not just presidential candidates, they have fielded candidates for parliamentary seats, for councillors. So you can imagine that maybe Chadema had their own target in the eye of analysis, which was not met. But other political parties have held their rallies. They are participating in these elections. They participated in the campaigns, and for the first time in history, for 62 days of the campaign, we have not seen any tear gas opened to any of the political parties. The campaigns have been rallied along issues instead of individualizing or targeting individuals like it used to be. So opposition parties are participating, quite a number, Chauma, DP, they are 17 in number, but only that Chadema opted not to participate in this election.
And what about concerns over a repressive environment? As I mentioned, several organizations raising this as a concern. Just what has been the campaigning space like?
The campaigning space, if you say repressive environment, this time around, I have covered in my lifetime as a journalist, I have covered about 7 or 8 general elections. This is the first time I have seen be it the ruling party, be it the opposition parties are holding their rallies, are running their campaigns free of intimidation, where you go to the rally, they talk.
Deodatus, it seems, I don't know if... Right, unfortunately, we have been disconnected to Deodatus Balile, chairperson of Tanzania's Editors Forum, that is ahead of the elections tomorrow. He says it's all good. In fact, this has been the best it has ever been in the run-up to the elections, albeit reports of abductions and enforced disappearances becoming commonplace, and opposition parties saying that they're constantly facing harassment. That brings the time to just about 5 minutes to 10. So we'll continue with Africa World Hour. Of course, this is ahead of African Diaries with Shayla Ntukumana, who is coming up. Oh, well, she has just walked in. Perfect timing. How you doing?
Ma'am, listen, if you could give me some good charcoal, I think I'd be great right now. I caught the bug.
It is the strangest thing.
Yeah.
You'd recall that I had it before I was off for a week.
Yes.
And even where I was off for a week, I had that. And my stomach is still not.
Is it still not piecing together?
Nah. It's such a strange thing. And several people I've heard also complain about it.
Listen, I was minding my own, and next thing, lock drums started happening in my belly. And I was like, what is this? What's going on? It is a few moments before the show. But here we are, and we'll push through.
Strength to you. It'll all be over. You'll be enjoying the show so much that you don't even notice.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you why we'll be enjoying the show. So in the very first hour of the show, we're going to be looking at a story that celebrates purpose, compassion, and leadership. Right? It is our GBV campaign segment that we focus on in the first hour, and we have an opportunity to speak to award-winning human rights activist, GBV ambassador, and the 2025 male CEO championing women empowerment at the South African Heroines Awards. We are going to have such an amazing time with Xolo Motaung, who is going to speak to bringing men into the context of GBV, outside the realities of them being predominantly the perpetrator. Are we having conversations that allow men to be comfortable enough to firstly take the time to reflect and see if they too are not victims? I think that's something men can be a bit blasé about, you know. It was a cool thing. I was young, you know, it was the hip thing to do at the time. And so what I do know is that Xolo is going to come into the context to just give us, firstly, the importance of inclusivity in these kinds of conversations. Because if you are trying to stop perpetrators, blaming them doesn't change the context. It's affording them an opportunity to understand what's happening. That sort of gives them some kind of leeway in thought space. That happens in the first hour. Then in the second hour of the show, Tsepiso, do you run?
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
No, I'm actually, you know why I'm laughing? Because I was speaking to someone and we were just talking about, I was like, you know, I really would love to be able to run.
Mm-hmm.
Brisk walking has been my thing, but if I do that, the treadmill is the only place that I can do it. Medically, I have a medical condition. I can't. I've had various operations on my feet, so I can't run. But I would love to. I would love to. It's such a cool thing to do, to just like sit off and, you know, you got a steady pace going
into flight.
I've tried it, but more for me medically that I can try and do it on the treadmill, but not on the road.
So we are going to be observing this coming Friday, annual Daredevil Run, and this is in support of creating awareness around prostate cancer. Right, another focal point on men, because sometimes I feel like they shy away from their sentiments, their emotions, their feelings, from sickness. I have never in my life understood how men think it's okay to keep quiet when you're not okay. I don't get it.
You think men don't talk when they're sick?
Ma'am, we've seen it.
Ow.
It's the last
they're the
breath.
Biggest babies.
When they're comfortable. When there's a sense of comfortability. And how long did it take for you to get there
Have
with
you
them?
seen a man with flu?
When he's comfortable, you'll see the biggest baby. But if he's not, my goodness, he'll be struggling to breathe through his nose and be like, I'm fine.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe it's our generation. Who knows? These young people here.
Okay, that's interesting.
You have thoughts. I want to hear them.
I know. I just think like, they're white, man. Like, you would think they are dying.
Really?
I think it's women who are so used to socialize to just, to inner and just carry on with it. And women we do. Doesn't matter what you're going through, you just do it.
Yeah.
Men, oh my goodness.
But what I do appreciate about women is that they talk. So they're not going to pretend like nothing is happening. And I think that for me is the issue, because then issues such as prostate cancer that could be diagnosed much earlier take a longer time, and then you're in stage 3, 4 of that cancer. And so we are going to have an opportunity to unravel that conversation. I'm looking forward to seeing the runners on the pitch. I don't think I'll be running. We need to deal with another bug.
Do you run?
Yes.
So why won't you run?
Because there's a bug. We don't know how long this bug is going to stay. We don't know what's happening. So I don't want to commit to things I can't say I'm going to make it to. Just now you're on the pitch and how?
Should already be running. You'll be running.
Stop it. Stop it. Stop.
All right. Thank you, Shayla. That's up next. African Diaries from us and the team. It's good night for now.
Channel Africa, where every moment is an African celebration. Feel the energy, feel the connection. Channel Africa, the African perspective.